Nowadays, the impression of a city of any size is mainly shaped by modern architecture. Buildings from bygone eras are usually a special attraction. Buildings from antiquity in particular attract many people. Diocletian's Palace in Split is an exemplary case. The palace as such is a great representative of the Roman imperial architecture. To understand Diocletian's Palace in Split, we need to take a look into the life story of Diocletian. Diocletian, or Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletianus in full Latin name, was born 245 AD somewhere in Dalmatia and died 316 AD in his palace in modern-day Split. He was a soldier who rose to military commander and commander of the emperor's guard. He became an emperor in 284, and during his 20 years long rule, he introduced order, secured the borders, reorganized the army, finances and taxes. In 285, he introduced Maximilian as his co-emperor, and in 293 he introduced a new model of ruling called tetrarchy, or a rule of four. He abdicated in 305 and moved to Split, and he is remembered as the only Roman emperor who voluntarily abdicated. As a pensioner in his palace, he did gardening and often told people of Rome, "If you only knew how good cabbage is here, you would never call me back to Rome." The palace was built in record time between 295 and 305. Who carried out the construction is not clearly documented. There is the theory of the Greek builders, Philotos and Zotikos, since their names are carved in stone. The palace was separated from the outside by walls about 17 meters high, with square corner towers and additional defensive towers on the facades. Only exception was the south side facing the sea, where the Bronze Gate or the South Gate was located, which was originally directly on the sea. The gates were forming the main entrances to the palace. Other entrances were the Silver Gate or the East Gate, the Golden Gate or the North Gate, and the Iron Gate or the West Gate. All gates differed above all in their function and as well as in their artistic decoration. The Golden Gate, for example, is decorated somewhat more boastfully than the Silver Gate, because of the statues of the four tetrarchs standing in the niches, and because of the assumption that Diocletian is said to have entered his palace through this gate in June of 305. The mausoleum was the final resting place of Emperor Diocletian. The complex, which has an octagonal floor plan, is supported by 24 columns and has a circular interior with 4 niches, semicircular, and 4 niches rectangular. Diocletian's sarcophagus was located in the center, but later disappeared. Thanks to the uninterrupted continuity of life through more than 1,700 years, the palace has been preserved to such an extent that today it is one of the best preserved ancient palaces of the Roman Empire. In addition, all the architectural layers from antiquity to the present day have been perfectly preserved in the palace and the city around it. Based on a study prepared, the historical core of Split, together with Diocletian's Palace, was described on the UNESCO's World Heritage List in 1979. This is the story about the father of the Croatian literature, Marko Marulić, and his fundamental work, the epic Judith. The transition from the 15th to the 16th century was a time of great socio-political, demographic, and economic instability for Split and the people of Split. Once independent Split commune was forced to accept the supreme Venetian rule at the beginning of the 15th century. That only happened after several centuries of resisting Venetian claims to the Eastern Adriatic and trying to preserve communal autonomy within the Hungarian-Croatian kingdom. In such circumstances, the urban structure of Split was changing, because the new authorities were trying in all ways, both real and symbolic, to submit the city to Venice. During the 15th century, the construction and decoration of the main town square of St. Lawrence, took place. On the north side of the square were erected public buildings of the city administration in the style of Venetian ornate Gothic. In addition, on the coast along the southern walls of Split, the Venetians built a castle to house their military crew. At the same time, the symbols of the previous administration were removed and signs of the new government were erected in the city. Since then, the winged lion has decorated public prominent places in the city, such as city gates or fortifications, and even churches. The Turks began to appear as a factor in the Balkans just at the time when Venice was establishing its rule in Dalmatia. In the decades leading up to the Battle of Varna in 1444, they gradually and safely expanded their positions in Asia Minor and Eastern Europe, while at the same time their solitary looting companies were already reaching the districts of the Dalmatian communes. However, despite the growing Ottoman threat in the hinterland, the Turks began to significantly influence the Dalmatian communes only after the fall of Bosnia in 1463. These were the historical circumstances in which the father of Croatian literature and the author of the first epic of Croatian literature sung in the Croatian language, Marko Marulić, is born. He was one of the most widely read authors of the European Counter-Reformation, and in his time he was a world-known author. He is a symbol, a continental symbol of that era. As a Christian missionary in the Far East, Saint Francis Xavier carried with him only two books, the Bible and the instruction written by Marulić. The British Library has a copy of Marulić Evangelistarium from 1529, which was the personal property of King Henry VIII of England. In addition to Henry's personal psalter, Marulić Evangelistarium is the book with the largest number of handwritten notes among all the preserved volumes of Henry's library. Marko Marulić, or as he is known by his Latin name, Marcus Marulus, was born in Split in 1450. After his education in Split, he probably studied in Italy and later performed various communal services in Split, and occasionally traveled to Venice and Rome. He wrote in Latin, Croatian and Italian, creating a huge and influential opus. He is best known for his two works, Instruction of a Virtuous Life, following the example of saints, and Evangelistarium. But he is also author of the epic Judith, that earned him the title of Father of Croatian Literature. Judith was written in 1501 and printed in 1521. Judith is the first extensive poetic work in the Croatian language and allegory about defending Split from Turks. Marko Marulić died and was buried in his hometown Split in 1524. Public history is the presence, usage and effects of the past in our everyday lived realities. There is a branch of public history called public sport history. Public sport history is the intersection of those forementioned ideas with sport. Most public sport history is visible through sport museums, halls of fame, and nostalgic celebrations. But beside this scholar approach, sport is an integral part of any culture and society, and also an important aspect of modern life. Both of those components can be easily found in the sportiest city in the world, Split. Therefore, story about football club Hajduk Split is inevitable. It all started back in 1911 on the King's Field, the old Hajduk's football field. With the approval of the imperial governorship and acceptance by Austro-Hungarian authorities in Zadar on February 13, 1911, the Croatian football club was founded. It was an initiative of Prague students who were born in Split. In Prague, in addition to university literature, they also enjoyed in trainings and matches of football clubs Sparta and Slavia, and socialized in the Ufleku pub where they founded a club. They soon introduced football to their fellow citizens, and after the first ball arrived in the town under Marian Hill, a story that continues to this day started. Although there was already a game in Split similar to today's football, called Kende, in which a hat was hit with the feet, it did not attract the attention that the rival to first ball in the city received. Upon their return to Split, Prague students gathered young men who started to train. In the Café Trokoli, stationed on the main city square, the rules were written and the foundations of the club were laid. It seems that it was easier to play football than to name the club. Fabian Kaliterna, Lucian Stella, Ivan Šakić and Vjekoslav Ivanišević could not agree on club's name, so they sought help from a high school professor, Josip Barač, who was connected with everything that happened in Split, from the cultural to the intellectual to the sport aspect of life. As the students burst into the room of Professor Barač, he told them, "You came to me uninvited, without knocking, like real Hajduks. In the European lands of the Ottoman Empire, the term Hajduk was used to describe bandits of the Balkans who were known for their sudden incursions. So let that be your name, Hajduk. As you know, that word in our nation means something most beautiful, heroism, honesty, defiance of the powerful, protection of the weak. Be worthy of that name. All kings and emperors must die. Hajduk will stay." Soon as the Hajduk was founded, the citizens of Split, which at that time had only about 20,000 inhabitants, split into those who were for and against football. However, the football was already rolling through the King's Field, and it was impossible to drive it out of the city. The first training match between the first and second team was played in the mid-April. The first actual game was against Calcio Spalato, the Italian club from Split, and Hajduk won in that game with 9-0, with the first goal scored by player Šime Rauning. In 1912, Hajduk played its first away game in Zagreb against the football club Hašk and lost 3-2. The number of matches that Hajduk played at that time not only increased the strength of the club, but also its financial stability. In 1923, Hajduk played in the League of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia for the first time, but did not achieve much. Hajduk won the first title in 1927. Then they appear on the European stage for the first time. More than a way of life, more than a true love, you could list all the phrases to describe the connection between Hajduk and Split, and they would never be good enough. So let's finish with the verses. In happy days, in rough days, I can't do nothing but to love him.